Okay, hello everyone. Hey, before we get started, can I get you guys to make sure your doors are shut and your other devices are turned off? I'm going to cover quite a bit of information in a short period of time, so I'll need your full attention. Also, everyone on this call will receive a copy of this training and the material at the end of the broadcast. My name is Chris Duffield, and I'm an account executive for New Line Mortgage. For about the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about cross-selling and how this can translate to building trust with your borrowers and earning referral business. More specifically, we're going to focus on cross-selling high LTV products. Also, before we get started, I'd like to take a moment and ask for your business. As an AE, I'm paid commission. So the best compliment you can give me is to send me a loan. If you find this training useful and learn something new, please send me a loan on this or any other product. New Line does offer some great FHA, VA, conventional, and USDA pricing right now. And I actually have trainings on all of these products as well as various other subjects. At the end of this training, I'll show you a link to my blog. And if you're interested in joining my blog, just send me an email and I'll send you an invitation. And you can go in there and create a WordPress account. My blog is not made public. It's private, so you do have to create a WordPress account. And you have to accept my invitation, and then I can get that all set up for you. So we'll cover that at the end of the broadcast today. So let's go ahead and get started. Cross-selling high LTV purchase products. So cross-selling is a vital sales technique. The ability and practice of selling other products can be key to keeping a customer and be key to gaining referral business. And I actually found a great article that describes 8 ideas for cross-selling success. I mean, you can Google cross-selling. That's what I did, and I came up with quite a few links. This is one that struck me as most useful. It looks like it's by a company called Startup Nation. I'm not going to run through and discuss all of these points, but you will receive, obviously, a copy of the material with a link to this. I suggest you go in and kind of review what they have to say about cross-selling and how to keep it relevant, you know, how basically it should be second nature to you. And, you know, this is something that you guys should go out and train yourselves on and retrain, you know, everybody in your office and actually make it part of your normal sales routine. So read through this when you get a chance. I think it illustrates my point of the importance of cross-selling. The part I like about cross-selling is education. Education is an opportunity to build trust with your borrower. You might be worried about irritating your borrowers with too much information or too many sales pitches, but as the article suggests, surveys show that most buyers actually appreciate being told about additional products or services that might better meet their needs or about new items that were not offered in the past. Also, let's not forget that product education and choices are the basis for completing the anti-steering form. Product education can also set the stage for asking for referrals. Did you know that your borrowers are the happiest during the first few days of their mortgage? I read a statistic, it was a long time ago, many years ago, during some training, that it was 7 days, if I remember correctly, that your borrower is happiest during the first 7 days of their mortgage. And typically what we're doing during those first few days is, you know, we're educating and pre-qualifying your borrower. And during this time, they may not only be thinking about their own loan, but it's possible they could be relating to how some of the options you're giving them apply to their friends, family, or coworkers, especially if you're kind of asking them about, you know, who they know. Here's another, what I think is an awesome quick reference that again illustrates this point. So when you have a minute, jump in here and read through this about referrals, or Google mortgage referrals. You know, that's what I did. I'm starting to be a huge fan. Well, I've been a huge fan of Google for a long time. You literally can ask it any question. You can ask it underwriting questions too, by the way, and you get answers. But come in here and take a look at this link and see what they have to say. This is in regards to mortgage referrals specifically. And it's just some great information. Again, I'm not going to go through this. I just would like to point this out to you, that this is a great referral source. All right, so anyway, run through this when you get a chance. You can see it's got a lot of information. And you can see even in the referral process, it talks about cross promotions. So yeah, take some time, go through that. You know, make sure you're educating yourself on all available products and options, even if you're not actually using them on a regular basis. Product education. You only need to know the basics to cross-sell a product. Once you've determined there are other products available to your borrower, you can narrow your search from there. You know, there may be some aspects of the borrower scenario that need further research, like maybe their employment history, or they're starting a new job, they're keeping their current property. You know, there's some further digging that sometimes you need to do, but to actually just cross-sell and suggest other products, you only need to know the basics. Yeah, so don't worry about knowing all the underwriting guidelines. You know, get to know your products on the basics, and you should know the basic guidelines for all of your loan types, like high LTV purchases, which we'll cover today, low LTV purchases, rate and term refinances, cash outs, investment properties, 1 to 4 units. That's not on here, but that's, or multi-units, I should say. You know, that should be kind of an area where you should know, or you could cross-sell products for multiple units. Second home purchases, high balance purchases and refinances. You know, if you get to know your different products by these types of categories, it makes it very easy to cross-sell, and it's pretty easy to put together a quick reference. So today, we're going to give you a quick reference. So I've created a chart that kind of demonstrates how easy it is to create a quick reference tool. So you get to take this home with you today, and you know, I'll be doing some future classes, and I'll focus on some of those other topics, and you know, maybe put together a quick reference for multi-units or investment properties or low LTV cash outs. It's kind of easy to remember product guidelines if you think of them in those categories. So for the high LTV purchase products, what I've put together is, you know, we've got our basic guidelines, and then I've got the different products that kind of handle a high LTV purchase. So the first problem or issue a high LTV purchase covers is the minimum down payment requirement. So conventional, they have a great product right now for a minimum down payment. It's 3%, so a 97% LTV. You guys, this is going to go away in mid-November, just so you know. DU released some notes, and if you haven't already received it, ask me for it. I've got a copy of the memo from Fannie Mae that in mid-November, the 97% LTV is going to go away, and your max LTV for Fannie Mae is 95%. I'm double checking to see if LP is the same or not, what's happening with LP, but DU is definitely going away. They're going to be a max 5% down payment requirement. But right now you've got 3% down for conventional. You've got 3.5% down for FHA. If you're working with a veteran, you've got 0% down typically. It may require a down payment, you know, if your value comes in less than the sales price, or you're exceeding the maximum loan limits for the county, and they want to come in with the difference. USDA is typically a 0 down, but again, you may get a down payment requirement if the value is less than the sales price. So you've got 4 products that you can cross-sell for a minimum down payment to meet a minimum down payment requirement. You know, when you cross-sell, though, there's usually other aspects of the loan you need to take a look at. You know, maybe they don't have, maybe they need a low down payment and they need to be able to utilize a gift for their down payment. Currently on a conventional loan, that's allowed. On an FHA loan, that's allowed. VA, it's not allowed. And USDA, it's allowed if they need a gift. Seller contributions. You know, so of course when you're working with a high LTV borrower, they're obviously very sensitive as to what, well, not like they're not sensitive anyway, but they're ultra sensitive on what they need to come in with. And you need seller concessions to work with. On a conventional loan, it's 3% seller concessions between 90.01 to 95% LTV, 6% between 75.01 to 90%, and then 9% below 75% LTV. FHA at 6% seller contributions, VA it's 4%, USDA is 6%. You also have the ability to finance 2% of the closing costs if the value supports that. And then of course you've got your FICO requirements. So on a conventional loan, it's a 620 FICO if the borrower has at least 5% down, 680 if 3% down, and if all of the down is a gift above an 80% loan to value, then the FICO is 740 as per MI. Okay, and that really should be above 80.1 LTV. It's only MI that requires that 740 FICO. And then on FHA, the minimum FICO is 620 if the borrower has 4.5% down, and that cannot be gifted, by the way, or 640 for all other scenarios. VA, you need a 640. USDA, you need a 640. BK and foreclosure guidelines. You know, they're a little too much to put in this little chart, so we have got, Newline has this nice little matrix that I'll make sure is included with the class material that you're going to get. And it gives you the guidelines for conventional FHA, VA, USDA, high balance, and jumbo for your different BK foreclosure and pre-foreclosure guidelines. So keep this as a quick reference. Your DTI requirements. So over 45%, I need a 660 FICO. Over 50%, I need a 680 FICO. You know, under 45, I just need the 620 FICO, and that's on your conventional loan. On your FHA loan, over 45%, I need a 660 FICO. Over 50%, I need a 680 FICO. You know, under 45%, of course, I need a 640 FICO. Or 620, depending on how much they have down. And then on a VA loan, over 45%, I need a 660 FICO, and your max is a 50% DTI. Of course, under 45%, we're going with the 640 FICO. And then USDA, I can run GUS. That is the system that USDA uses, the automated underwriting system. I can run that for you. GUS will approve every time, no doubt, no questions asked. They'll go up to 47.99% on your DTI. And just so you know, on your payment ratio, they'll go up to 35.99%. They will not go 0.01% above this. Literally, this is the max. You can go to 47.99. You cannot go to 48. You cannot go to 36. It goes right to that point, and when you go above that, it will decline the loan. And their guidelines, I think, are 29 and 41. They're almost immaterial, what their guidelines are, because literally they'll exceed those guidelines every time and go up to these ratios. The AUS required for your pre-approval. For conventional and FHA, you're using DU. For VA, you should be using LP. It's a lot less strict than DU. And then, like I said, for USDA, you're using GUS. Reserve requirements. There are no reserve requirements on any of these products. You don't have to worry about that. Mortgage insurance. You know, you should all be aware that there's some type of mortgage insurance on these products. And just so you know, I do have, now I don't have one for conventional, but I have a pre-qualification class for FHA and a pre-qualification class for VA and a pre-qualification class for USDA. And it teaches you how to pre-qualify your borrowers on all of these products. And I get a lot more in depth into the MI requirements. It gives you the MI charts and what's required. So I'm not going to get into the specific MI requirements just to keep this class to a minimum. There's other training that you can refer to that will go through these. But they all have some type of MI requirement. You know, conventional, if you're over 80%, you do need private mortgage insurance. We do have LPMI available all the way up to a 97% LTV. So that usually turns out to be the least expensive, or it has the least impact on the borrower's payment, because we're rolling this into the interest rate and the MI is paid through the rate, and it just has a little bit less of an effect on the payment than if we're paying it monthly. You know, FHA, we all know you have upfront mortgage insurance plus an annual premium that's paid monthly for the life of the loan. VA only has an upfront funding fee, and they don't have an annual, so again, it has kind of a minimal impact. And then USDA is the same as FHA. They have an upfront and they have an annual. However, the amount is a lot less than FHA. It's not as expensive, and it's set. And I actually think somewhere down in here I might have, somewhere down in this chart, I actually did break out some of these numbers. The thing to know on these high LTV programs is you could be working with a loan amount limit or an income limit. You know, conforming is the most lenient. They don't have, other than their conforming loan limit, they don't have any income limitations, so you can go up to 417. If you exceed 417, you could be moving into a jumbo or a high balance category. If it's high balance, then you're looking at a 90% max LTV. FHA, you are subject to loan limits, okay? They vary per county, and you can look those up on FHA's website, or I can send you the link. And if you exceed the loan limits, the conforming loan limits, and you move on to the high balance category for FHA, it's still pretty cool because it's the same down payment requirements. You do have a little bit more higher FICO requirement. Again, I have classes in my blog. I have one class for FHA high LTV, one class for conventional high balance, and then I have a VA high balance. So I have high balance classes for all three of those agencies if you want to check those out and get more familiar with your high balance classes. And then again, you know, VA, you're going to be subject to loan amount limits. Again, if you exceed the conforming loan amounts, you move on to the high balance category. USDA is subject to both income and county limits and restrictions. So your borrower's income cannot exceed the median income they've established for that area based on, you know, area and family size, and then it's only for certain counties. And again, take my USDA pre-qual training, and we'll go through and tell you how to research that information. You know, the loan terms, you kind of need the loan terms if you're going to cross-sell a product. So you've got all the different loan terms available and the ARMs available for conventional and for FHA and for VA. USDA is strictly a 30-year fixed rate only. That's all they have available. Now, on the ARM programs, conventional, you're using a 3-1, a 5-1, or a 7-1 ARM. The margins are a 2% first adjustment cap, a 2% annual cap, and a 5% life cap. If you're not familiar with ARMs, what this is, your 2% adjustment cap means that when it converts from an ARM to, or excuse me, a fixed rate to an ARM, so up here, a 3-1 ARM, that means it's fixed for 3 years and then it turns into a 1-year adjustable. So after 3 years, there's going to be, there's going to be adjustment from one payment to the next that takes you from a fixed rate to an ARM. That adjustment can never be more or less than 2% than what your start rate was on that ARM. So if your start rate was 3.5, on the first payment change date, it cannot exceed 5.5. Okay? And then throughout so then it turns into a 1-year adjustable, so every year it's going to adjust. Every year after that, it can't adjust more than 2%. Okay? And then for the life of the loan, it can never go over 5% than what you started out with as an initial payment or an initial start rate. So if we go back to the example, you had a 3.5% start rate. That means your life cap is 8.5. The interest rate will never ever exceed 8.5. It's got that life cap on it. Okay, so those are the caps, and on a conventional loan, your margin is fixed at 2.25, and it's based off the LIBOR index. So you would go to a rate sheet and you would look up what the LIBOR index is. Let's say it's 3%. Okay, and then you add that to the 2.25, so that would be 5.25%. That would be what they use to calculate what your payment is when it adjusts. So every year, your servicer is going to go look at the LIBOR index, and whatever it is currently, they're going to add it to this fixed margin, and that's going to be what the interest rate is for that year, and then that's how they calculate the adjustment every year. And just know this 2.25 margin is also your floor rate, so your borrower's rate will never go below the 2.25. Okay, so that's kind of a quick introduction to ARMs. You'll notice that FHA and VA, their ARMs are a little better. If I were selling ARMs, I would take a look at selling the FHA or the VA ARMs as opposed to the conventional ARMs, depending on the other aspects of the file and if it all works. And the reason why is their margins and their caps. So they have a 1% first adjustment cap, a 1% annual cap, and then a 5% life cap. And their margin is only 2%. That's fixed for the life of the loan. And it's based off the 1-year T-bill index, which I think the 1-year T-bill index is a little bit higher than the LIBOR. And then VA has the same. They have the same adjustments. And then, of course, USDA, they don't have ARMs. Okay. When you're looking at the number of units, so conventional will work with 1 to 4 units. However, the more the units, the lower the LTV. So you'll want to consult your guidelines and see what your max LTV is for multiple units. What's cool about FHA is whether it's 1 to 4 units, you still get your max financing options. Same with VA, 1 to 4 units, you get your max financing options. USDA is 1 unit only. Of course, conventional loans have purchase programs for all the different occupancy types. FHA, VA, and USDA don't. They're strictly owner-occupied only. Now, a lot of times on these higher LTV type loans, what typically goes hand in hand with those is perhaps a non-occupant co-borrower. And of course, a non-occupant co-borrower isn't any good unless you can blend the DTI. You can actually do that on Freddie Mac LP. They'll blend the DTI. The borrower must have 5% of their own funds into it. FHA will allow a non-occupant co-borrower, and they will blend the ratios as well. Both VA and USDA do not have that guideline. Assumability. I bring this up. It's not common, but you know what? It's a great sales point to FHA. FHA, I think, is, a very viable product. I know the mortgage insurance kind of kicks a lot of people out of wanting an FHA program, but I'll tell you, after November, if all the 3% programs go away or conventional, then FHA is going to become very popular again. And you know, this is a great kind of sales technique, especially since we're still in a low-rate environment, is the assumability of an FHA loan. Conventional loans, not assumable. FHA, yes. If you have a qualified applicant, they fully qualify, they can go into the current servicer of the loan and apply to assume the loan. That is a great marketing tool. If rates go up and you're sitting there with a lower interest rate, you can actually advertise that when you're trying to sell your property, and it, you know, could help a borrower sell their property. VA will allow an assumption by another qualified veteran, and then USDA does not have any assumption options. Of course, streamlines, that ends up being a great sales tool. You know, down the road, if rates do go down, your borrowers have the ability to streamline on different products. They do for FHA, VA, and USDA, obviously not conventional. Identity of interest, you do need to pay attention to this if you're working on an FHA loan. Conventional, VA, USDA, they don't have any identity of interest guidelines. FHA does. If they're buying from a family member, or if there's any relationship between the borrower and seller, there are different requirements. You'll want to jump into my FHA pre-qual training and find those out, or just email me and I can send them to you. You know, kind of taking a look at the pricing and fee differences between the products. Typically, the rate on a conventional loan is a little higher than the other products, but the MI is cheaper, and the MI, of course, can be dropped after the borrower achieves enough equity. And like I said, the MI can be lender paid, so it just doesn't have as big of an effect, you know, on the payment. FHA, the rate is typically a little lower, but the MI is more expensive, and it's for the life of the loan. And as we know, they have an annual MI premium that's calculated into the payment and has a pretty big impact on the loan in terms of what your borrower has to pay monthly, and that, of course, could affect the DTI and qualification guidelines. You know, as far as VA is concerned, their rates are comparable to FHA. Just know that we don't charge an underwriting fee on VA loans, and that funding fee is financed into the loan. They don't have a monthly, so it doesn't have as big of an impact on the payment. And then USDA, their rates are comparable to FHA as well. They have an annual and an upfront premium, as I mentioned before, and they call it a guarantee fee. But it's pretty inexpensive and it's fixed. It is for the life of the loan. They have a 2% upfront and a 0.4% annual, and that's fixed, regardless of LTV. Well, you know, it's usually 0% down, and they only do it on a 30-year fixed rate. So, other products. So inside some of these product lines, you know, and I didn't put this on here, and I should. I'm going to go back and correct this so that you have the guidelines. But conventional loans do have the Fannie Mae Home Path loan program available, and the Fannie Mae Home Path just allows for easier qualification guidelines. And I'll send you those. Those will be included as part of the material that I send out. I think it waives MI, and it has some less strict guidelines. But it does have to be a Fannie Mae owned home. So this is a program Fannie Mae designed to help sell their portfolio of loans. FHA has something similar. They have their HUD REO program. So you can purchase a HUD REO, and it's typically a $100 down payment is all that's required for that HUD REO program. They also have a Good Neighbor Next Door program, and they are coming out with the Back to Work program. I don't know a lot about that. It's fairly new. Newline is currently not offering it. But in part of the material that I send you today, you'll get the mortgagee letter that goes through that. But, you know, there are some other programs inside, you know, conventional and FHA. VA and USDA, they don't have other programs. And I've given you a couple of references here. We've got the Good Neighbor Next Door link. I'll click on that for you real quick and give you kind of a quick introduction to this. This is a great program for a teacher or a law enforcement officer or a firefighter, maybe an EMT. What you want to do is click on this link and come in here and do your research. Depending on their profession and where they're moving, they could get a reduction of 50% of the sales price. FHA actually will subsidize 50% of the sales price for them. And hey, if it happens to be a HUD REO loan, then it's only $100 down. So what the Good Neighbor Next Door does is it subsidizes 50% of the sales price, but the borrower still has to come in with the required 3.5% down. Unless it happens to be a HUD REO, then it's only $100 down. I've actually done one of those. I did a HUD REO on a Good Neighbor Next Door program, and that was just an incredible deal for that borrower. So come in here and take a look and see what the guidelines are for this program. It's great. And then I'll also send you the guidelines for the FHA Back to Work program. Like I said, I really don't know that much about it. We're not offering it yet. We're waiting to see if we're going to have any investor overlays. And it's basically, it eases up on the credit guidelines for borrowers who've had extenuating circumstances in regards to employment in the last few years. And then you've got your HUD REO program. I already mentioned that, $100 down for HUD REO properties. Okay, so how does this all translate to referral questions? So as you're going through all of this information with your borrower, you're getting to know them. You could be getting them to think about who they know. Even though some of these products might not be a fit for them, they'll most likely know somebody who can use at least one of these products. I mean, we went through a lot of features on here, and you could develop a whole list of questions based on any of these loan features up here. And I've got some samples. And I would be very specific, I mean, you can ask a borrower, hey, do you have a referral? Do you know anybody looking to buy? Do you know anybody looking to refinance? Do you know anybody who needs a mortgage? But I think you get a lot more success when you're a lot more specific with them. And, some of the examples, do they know anybody that wants to buy a home but is struggling with the down payment requirement? Do they know anybody looking to purchase a 4-unit property? Do they know a teacher, a firefighter, or a policeman? Do they know anybody looking to purchase their first home? Do they know anybody renting in a rural area? Do they know a veteran? Do they know anybody looking for an ARM? These were just some examples that I kind of thought up pretty quick, but if you took some time, you could probably get some really specific questions. And if you're not already doing it, you could create a referral marketing program to your existing customers, asking them questions like the one above. So, you can ask a lot of these questions to your customer while you're working with them. And remember, start asking the first day you're working with them. They're the happiest during the first few days of their loan. That's when you should be asking them for referrals. Not waiting until the end of the process or sometime later. You should be getting that out of the way and immediately putting them into some kind of a referral marketing campaign, maybe once a month or so, send out an email or a postcard or something, that asks the question, do you know blah, 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 and then maybe putting a few bullet points in regards to the product that would, satisfy whoever's looking for, that type of a purchase. You could maybe even create a takeaway piece for your borrowers, cards or something like that with hypothetical examples of what a good faith would look like for at least 3 different programs. So, an average loan amount, like my average loan amount, I do a lot of loans across the state, various brokers, and my average loan amount is right around $200,000. It's a great kind of round number. You could create 3 hypothetical good faith estimates, based off of an average loan amount, and kind of create what the fees would look like, what the payment would look like, and maybe have them, hand that out to some of your customers, comparing it to maybe an ARM and a fixed rate, and a couple of different fixed rate programs. I don't know. I know rates change and things change, and it's hard to put together, print, but definitely an email campaign, or even some education. Invite them to your own blog and your own training, and invite them to some education, or invite their friends to some education on some of these specific products that might fill a specific type of borrower looking to purchase. Anyway, that's just some ideas I have, and I just think that, this cross-selling really does kind of cover a lot of bases. You need to be able to cross-sell your customers for real, in case they really don't qualify for the program they want. But it's a great sales tool to build trust and gain referral business. And integrating cross-selling as a part of your sales strategy not only creates opportunity for referral business, it satisfies the anti-steering requirements, and again, builds that trust with your borrower, hopefully creating a lifelong customer. So you guys, that is my spiel for today. I'm glad that you took a moment to hang out with me. When you get a chance, here is my link to my blog. It's going to make me log in. Bear with me. I'll probably have to log in twice. I don't know why. Sometimes it just does that. But what you guys need to do is you need to create a WordPress account, and then you actually need to accept my invitation to join. So if you would just email me, I'll send you a fresh invitation. Yeah. And you can go in and join. Let's see if it'll take it now. All right, so here's my blog, and I've kept it kind of plain so that you're not having to do a lot of searching. What I would do is actually come down here into categories. I've got all my trainings under different categories. You can see that I've got FHA specific training. I've got full doc VA training for LOs and processors that might have limited full doc experience. My high balance loan guideline training I've got in that category. I've got some training specific to processors and loan officers. That's where this training is going to be located. Really nothing you need to worry about in the uncategorized training. And then I've got my USDA training all categorized. So like right now in the processor and loan officer training, I've got how to build a case for your loan. That's actually the class I did last week. Limiting conditions and understanding the loan process. Purchase contract analysis, basic income calculations. I've got some pretty good training in there that you can use regardless of what loan product you're working on. So again, you guys, thank you for your time. Send me a loan and have a great day.